Welcome, everybody, to what has been a weekly School of Pharmacy town hall. As usual, I just want to make you aware of the usual tips as it relates to this webcast. Your audio and video will be automatically muted. Only panelists can unmute themselves. The chat function is disabled. And so once again, please use the Q&A feature for any questions. As always, we will answer all outstanding questions via email, but if you give it to us anonymously, we'll do our best to do that at the next town hall meeting. And as has been the case every time, we will hold all questions to the very end of the presentation. So this is our 8th full week of shelter at home. And I think you will all agree that the pandemic outlook nationally has changed quite a bit since we last met. Perhaps the most obvious change is that it is now predicted that we're going to have quite a sustained epidemic peak, averaging over 2,000 predicted COVID-19 deaths a day for weeks to come. And I think you'll know that there are a number of states with very large epidemics type of trajectory, and some examples include New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. I think you also know that New York is the main exception, with its predicted peak now and gradually downward trend in predicted deaths from this moment on. In fact, you may remember or know there's an associate professor at UC Irvine who has shown US data with and without New York included, showing that if you take New York out of the picture, that if anything, there is a continued augmentation in death taking place and predicted to take place for a very long time. Again, New York being the exception. They also are highlighting that there are several states that have predicted peaks much later. These are going to include Georgia, Massachusetts, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and a number of others that I will not at this time. There were some updates from Governor Gavin Newsom. The first point was the movement of California from what he calls stage 2 of its 4-phase reopen plan. And I think you're all aware of the modification stay-at-home orders, which has been taking place. Perhaps what is more important at the moment were the reports out of the governor's office today. And I'll quote it, that they are expecting that California is going to experience a $54.3 billion deficit over the next year and send the state's unemployment rate well above its peak in the Great Recession. And this comes from a memo released by Governor Gavin Newsom's office. And to just give you a sense of how that compares with the past, Governor Newsom's January budget proposal was at a total of $222 billion, and he projected a $5.6 billion surplus through July 2021. So I'll repeat again, as opposed to a projected $54.3 billion deficit over the next year, as per his report today. Moving to the city and county of San Francisco, the mayor announced just a few days ago free testing for all essential workers, healthcare workers, first responders, grocery clerks, construction workers, drivers, childcare workers, and others who continue to leave their homes each day to serve San Francisco during the stay-home order. And then I'm going to share some of the data that I do every week with you, and remind you, in California last week, there were a total of 48,870 cases, 1,982 deaths. As of 1 p.m. today, there are 60,616 cases, predominantly in Southern California, and there are 2,504 deaths. The last thing I always like to point out to you is the oft-used national and otherwise University of Washington projected peak total deaths. And the total deaths in the past was 2,000 64 by August 4th, and that's what they projected last week. As of now, that projection also still by August 4th, and I'll repeat again what last week was. Last week was 2,104. They predict that total to be 4,666 deaths by August 4th. And lastly, the UCSF situation last week, to remind you, of a total of 64 hospitalized COVID patients to date then last week. 45 of those 64 were discharged from the hospital and 2 had died. As of 5/5, there was a total of 78 hospitalized patients at UCSF, and the logistics were 31 of them requiring critical care, so that meaning ICU status, and of those, 22 of those 31 required a ventilator. Of that total of 78 hospitalized at the current time, 54 of them have been discharged, but we are up to now 3 deaths, up from 2 last week. Last week also at this moment in time, there were a total of 19 cases at UCSF. As of 2 p.m. today, there are 15 hospitalized patients at UCSF. The last piece of COVID data that I wanted to share with you, you may have noticed literally in the last hour, in the New England Journal of Medicine, reported a study of hydroxychloroquine and its effect in COVID-19. And this was a large observational study involving hundreds of patients with COVID-19 who had been admitted to the hospital. Now, this was not a prospective randomized controlled trial. Essentially, though, in this at least observational study, including univariate multivariate analysis, hydroxychloroquine administration was not associated with either a greatly lowered or increased risk of the composite endpoint of intubation or death. They conclude what every trial has concluded, that randomized controlled trials of hydroxychloroquine in patients with COVID-19 are needed. So that is the that kind of updates from what you heard last week from Dr. Yang's analysis, where she highlighted remdesivir particularly, and I think where she particularly pointed out the value of the one prospective randomized placebo-controlled trial by NIAID, which did demonstrate some remdesivir effect in that trial. Moving to the survey results that were requested of those that were part of the webinar last week. Thank you to all who answered the survey. In excess of 60% of you responded to the survey. And I thought I would tell you what the order of topics were that you wanted covered in future town halls in priority order. Number 1 was reopening the school and the campus. And it is fortunate that we, in fact, are going to start talking about that today with our 2 special participants, Dr. Youmans and Dr. Desai. The second thing in topics was the financial impact of the pandemic. Well, I'm starting to hint at that, what I think is evolving from the governor's announcement today. It's hard to believe that will not impact on his decision on money to the University of California, but we will wait till we get more information until we get into that. And I'll say to you, I have received nothing from the chancellor's level in any way, on any plans in any way, in terms of financial impact at all. The third topic that was considered to be our priority was to hear about school research on COVID-19. And starting, I believe, tomorrow, we will have a list posted to the school website, and you're welcome to take a look at that in a day or 2. Last couple were patient care approaches, responses to COVID-19 related to the school, and lastly, the impact of the COVID-19 on the PharmD program, which we will be addressing today. In terms of outstanding questions from last week, all were answered. There are none at this time. So at this point, I'd like to shift gears, and I want to bring in our 2 distinguished faculty who are going to get down to the reopening of the school. And the first one that we're going to hear about is going to be Sharon Youmans, Vice Dean of the School of Pharmacy. who covers all things education and diversity for us. She is going to update you as evidence-based as she can in exactly 5 minutes on where we are on PharmD education. That will be followed by Dr. Desai, who I will introduce in a little more detail when Sharon is done. I will request all questions be directed to them or to me, if it's appropriate, at the conclusion of both their presentations. So Dr. Youmans, if you could, please do educate us on the reopening of our PharmD education program. Sharon.
Thank you, Joe, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to give you some specifics about our plans of reopening the campus or bringing students and faculty back to campus for teaching activities. One of the things that has happened in the last few weeks is that all of the education deans have been meeting to come up with general principles and guidelines on how we're going to make decisions about reopening. Keeping in mind that all of our programs are unique and have unique needs, and that we have a lot of students, and we want to be able to bring faculty, students, and staff who support our education program back in a safe and orderly manner. All of these decisions will be made in concordance with our public health officials, the campus leadership, as well as directives from the state and the city. So let me give you some specifics about what is happening. Currently, our curriculum, we have our P1 students, and back in March, we had to quickly convert everything to remote access. And so far, that process has been going well. And again, kudos to our Office of Education and Instructional Services staff who have supported the faculty in that. And I also want to thank the faculty for being flexible and nimble and revising their curriculum to adjust to the remote access. The campus is moving into what we're calling a midterm phase, and I wanted just to give you some context that that time frame is from July to December. So all of my following remarks will be things that we'll be doing in that time frame, July to December. One of the questions that we are getting is that for our incoming class, so these are the students who are supposed to start in July, what is going to happen to them should they come back? Well, all of the programs, including ours, have agreed that we are asking all of our students to be in the San Francisco Bay Area to start the curriculum in July. The next question that we get, well, what is that going to look like in terms of who gets to come, when, how many get to come, etc. So we've made the decision that for all large group lectures, that usually what happened in the HSW rooms, all of those lectures will be made by remote access. Our class sizes are 127. We would have 2 cohorts on campus, so that would be a total of 254 students. So that is not in agreement with the current physical distancing and gathering numbers that we're working with this shelter-in-place order. Now we'll move to the small group meetings. We changed our curriculum where we're doing more of the small group with the critical thinking, problem solving, hands-on skills instruction. So our decision for now is that we will ask students to come to campus to do those activities that require the students to be in person. Examples of that include immunizations, where they're learning injection technique, aseptic technique, measuring blood pressure, and that will be scheduled and coordinated based on the parameters that we can have in terms of the number of students in a space, how far apart they have to be, etc. One of the things that we're very cognizant of and we worry a little bit about is about the socialization of our students. And as time goes on and as the parameters are relaxed, we have a plan in bringing back more of those small group activities, where they're discussing cases and solving problems, etc., as that will work out. We'll be coordinating all of this with the other programs in order to the extent possible, not overload the campus with too many students and faculty and staff at the same time. Uh, Another question that we get is about assessments. We have been providing those assessments via remote, and we will continue to do that. We have secure monitoring in place. And so into the near future, we will continue to provide our assessments via remote access. Now I'll shift gears to experiential education. All of you may have known that we did have a bit of a delay for our class of 2021 in starting their APPEs. Thankful to Val Kleinard and all of the program directors that the students are scheduled to start their APPEs on May 18th. And if all things go according to plan, the class of 2021 will finish and complete their APPEs in time to graduate as scheduled. Questions around IPPEs. We had to cancel the IPPEs for the P1s this year. They still have some time to make up, and we have plans of other activities that will help them make up those hours. The second year students are scheduled to start their 2-week hospital ops experience, and those plans are still on track to start. Our entering P1s are scheduled to do their community experiences, and those are also on track to start this fall. Once again, I say the caveat of all of this is that it is sort of a moving target, but we do have some specifics that we can share. Our main goal is the health, maintaining the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff. And we will be moving together with other programs and open up the campus to students as much as we possibly can, given our restraint. These are unprecedented times, and so everyone is going to have to think differently about how we provide education, and we'll do our best to provide the best support that we can for our faculty, students, and our staffs. So with that, I'm sure there'll probably be questions at the end. I will conclude my remarks. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sharon. So now I'd like to move over to the second speaker. And again, the focus of today is reopening. And so in this case, Dr. Desai, Tejal Desai, who's the chair of the Department of Bioengineering and Therapeutic Sciences, and also a member of David Morgan's committee on how to, in fact, move forward. She will be discussing reopening of school lab science. So Dr. Desai.
Thank you. As many of you know, UCSF labs were asked to suspend all non-essential activities on March 18th. So we are coming up on about 8 weeks. This process was actually overseen by a research shutdown task force chaired by David Morgan, and included both myself and Tanya Cortemi from the School of Pharmacy, as well as faculty members from across the UCSF campuses, Parnassus, Mission Bay, as well as across diverse departments, including physiology, biochem, anatomy, microbiology, and immunology. Since the order went into effect, we have essentially shut down 90% of our research activities, only making exceptions for essential COVID-related research. This does include, as we've heard previously, many School of Pharmacy faculty members, ranging in areas from drug discovery and drug dosing and PK to new forms of PPE and diagnostic systems. I think what has been really amazing is that every single exception and every single project has been vetted by this group, and really with a thoughtful approach to making sure that safety was ensured as this ongoing research has been happening. So we're now turning towards our plans for actually restarting research, which, as you can imagine, will be more difficult than actually closing down the labs. And there's 3 main principles that are being applied to this process. First, I think as Sharon mentioned, our top priority is the health and safety of everyone, and in this case, the lab staff and the community. Secondly, any resumption of activity has to be gradual. And third, we actually may need to turn back. So being flexible and transparent will be key to this process. The other thing for everyone to know is that research going forward is not going to be the same as it has been in the past, and we have to be prepared for really doing things in a new way. And so this committee has spent quite a bit of time putting together a document starting from April 6th, and now has been vetted by not only faculty, but also EH&S, the leadership, and various stakeholders across campus. And I won't go through all of the details. It will be released in the next couple of weeks, but I want to talk about some of the most important points. First of all, the key feature of the plan is that we maintain a low population density in the research labs as well as the research buildings. What this means is that in phase 1, that density will be limited to about 12.5%, or 1 in 8, if you can imagine every bay of a research lab having only one person. That doesn't sound like a lot, but in fact, that actually would be approximately 700 more individuals in every building. And so those numbers do add up quite rapidly. In phase 2, and this would happen once we know that things are working in phase 1, probably 2 to 3 weeks after, that density would move up to about 25%. So a 1 in 4 ratio, lab benches to people, or the other way around, people to lab benches. And even with that, what we will be requiring is that workers really enter labs in shifts and work on strict schedules to both minimize the density, but also maximize space without severely jeopardizing the progress of research. This is going to require from every single researcher teamwork, patience, generosity, and understanding. We may have to work differently in terms of how we schedule our hours during the day, whether that's the morning, afternoon, and night shifts, whether that's working on the weekends. And at any point during this, we also have to make sure that we practice safety, which means face coverings at all times, disinfecting high-touch surfaces, physical distancing, and no in-person meetings or gatherings, lab meetings, things that are not essential in order to be on the premises. And there will, although we don't know the details of this, be screening of some sort at the building entrances. So the big question, of course, is when will this all begin? And in terms of the timeline, we don't have a definitive answer. But in talking to Dave Morgan, he seems confident that this will, at least phase 1, will be in effect within 2 to 3 weeks. So that could be as early as the end of the month or early June. So we've been really encouraging the labs to start to talk about what will be the best practices within their laboratory setting, to start to talk to the individuals, students, postdocs, researchers, to figure out what would be best given your environment, given the types of work that you do, and the local physical space, because every lab we know is different. And so this is, we're not going to mandate exactly what you do, but really sort of these central guidelines. Some things to consider are how, really thinking about how people commute. Are they able to commute? If people have other obligations, including family obligations or childcare, to really make it so that people are comfortable in how they come in, when they come in, and have the choice to do so in a way that makes them comfortable. We realize that there's a great deal of uncertainty, and we will be providing information as we receive it. But I also encourage you to ask questions both now and later. And actually, there will be further information in terms of the graduate students and how this affects them at 4 p.m. today in another town hall that will be following this one. So with that, I will end. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tejal. I would like to maybe start the Q&A with a question for both of you, both Sharon and Tejal. If you could both answer this from your own perspective. It's kind of an inevitable question a lot of people are thinking about, and that is, to what degree within each of the purviews you have been responsible for today in this presentation, are you or others interacting with like everybody from the police department to the shuttle services to the library to, I guess it would be great to hear from both of you, to what degree are all these auxiliary services, these very important services, police, et cetera, how are they integrated in the thought process here for plans as well as timelines? So maybe I would ask Sharon first and then Tejal if she could answer secondly.
Sure. So in addition to the education deans, we have a weekly meeting that includes all those who are in charge of transportation, housing, student life services, student health, mental health. And so all those folks, people who are in charge of the scheduling of the classrooms, the library. So everyone is involved talking about what their individual needs are and how we can coordinate this effort, because we're all competing for the same space, and we want to be sensitive to students who require to complete their training for graduation. So all of those important supportive services are involved in helping us to inform the decisions about how and when we reopen the campus.
And I would echo that on the research front. I think the most important partner, of course, has been EH&S, and they have done an extraordinary amount of work in really looking at every single space on campus and figuring out what cannot be done in a safe manner. But they, along with the committee, have also been working with security, the police department, also looking at core facilities. So when the laboratories open, that the core facilities would also open, because many of us rely on that in terms of pursuing the research as well. So I think there has been quite a bit of conversation across the board.
Thank you both. So I'm gonna turn it over. We just have a couple of minutes, but I think we only have a couple of questions. So Eric and Grant, if you want to pose those questions to our panelists, please.
Sure, Joe. We've got 2 questions in 2 minutes here, so we'll move quickly. First question is from Mika Roth. How will research rotations for new grad students look like? Tejal, I know you mentioned that there was another town hall coming up at 4, but maybe you want to cover that.
Yes, this is something that actually is being actively discussed within the graduate programs. I don't think we've come to a conclusive answer about that. I know our graduate program has talked about everything from, thinking about virtual rotations, ways in which they can engage on non-wet lab experiences, to perhaps shifting it slightly, such that the timeline may allow for less density. But we will hear a little bit more about this from Dean Watkins today at 4 as well. Is definitely something that's been actively talked by all the program directors.
Okay, we have 2 more, but only 1 minute, so let's just get this last one in. Each lab, 1 person is in conflict with the policy that a minimum of 2 persons in lab for the safety reason at a regular time. I personally prefer 1 person in a lab as the COVID risk is higher, other than the safety concern.
Let me answer that quickly. It's not necessarily 1 person in a lab. It is 1 person for every 8 seats. So yes, if you have a smaller lab, that would be 1 person, but you can also think about other spaces as being separate areas. So whether there's a cell culture room or a microscopy room, that can also have an individual that is associated with that space. We recognize that we would like to ensure safety during these times, but one of the things we've also thought about is perhaps we can have cameras or other means at which people can actually keep track of individuals that are in the lab.
Okay, I think that's it. We have 1 more question, but we'll answer it offline.
Great, thank you, Grant. So I'll close with thanking Dr. Youmans and Dr. Desai for giving us these updates on reopening these respective parts of our mission. And to that end, I want to let you know the next town hall, we're going to delay it a little bit, because we have decided to focus on this reopening sort of aspect in concert with what you all wanted. And we felt that it would be important to at least wait a couple of weeks to see how the experiential goes. And at that time, we'll have Dr. Youmans, Dr. Kleiner to help us out on that. We will also maybe have a little more feedback on whether or not the timeline, what the timeline is from a laboratory standpoint, and whether it still is in the same plan that it is right now. So with that said, the next town hall will be Thursday, May the 28th, again from 3 to 3:30. So again, there will not be one on May 14th. There will not be one on May 21st. An Outlook invitation has already been sent to all of you. In the meantime, thank you once again for participating. Please stay safe and be well. Thanks.